Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Okay, guys, so I found another account of child sexual abuse in Scientology, April 1991. He got away with it, but I want to read it just so we can just reiterate how much of it's going on. We should just call Scientology, what was I going to call it? Pedotology? No, there was something else I was going to call it. Pedogate? Pedogate. So this is all of this is on a public forum. So I believe as long as something is published, it should be okay to say these names. Mrs. Garepi's difficult tale. Scientologist Buttnor, cleared of child abuse, says his former parishioner is out to get him. Don't they all say the same thing? They all say the same thing, but they all get their rocks off on hurting children because they can't get off like a natural, normal human being. You guys all know what would happen if I found one. Okay, and this is from Xeno Directory Net. I think this is in Canada, I believe. Always pay attention to how the police act, too. Because without saying it, you guys know what's up, right? I can't say too much. Police last month arrested Alan Anthony Buttnor. Listen to this. A minister and director of special projects for the Church of Scientology in Edmonton. They claimed he was working at the church offices, the fake church, last November 30th, when he fondled the chest of a church member's 10-year-old daughter. Maybe there's a reason I didn't have children. They also alleged he had picked up the girl in his car near her home on March 7th and repeated the act. Last week after a Crown prosecutor, and you guys all know what goes on in the UK, right? Just go listen to John Wedger, and there's some other really good ones. I think it's Sean Hannity Combs. I believe he's one. Really good stuff. I mean, not good, but good coverage. They also alleged he had picked up the girl in his car near her home on March 7th and repeated the act last week after a Crown prosecutor told the court that there is no evidence, that there is no evidence, that there is no evidence. I mean, they don't care even if you've got a video of it. There's never no evidence, is there? Child testimony's not enough. To substantiate the allegations, a provincial court judge dismissed all charges, 2 counts of SA, 2 counts of sexual interference, and 1 count of unlawful confinement. Nothing that a real strong father couldn't solve, right? Not a pedo father, but a real man, a real father. One thing they both agree on is that until 1980, Mrs. Garepi was a member of the Church of Scientology, a worldwide movement founded by American science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard that claims about 300 members in Edmonton. Mr. Buttnor says she was excommunicated from the church in 1980, it's disconnection, for her refusal to abide by the moral and ethical codes of the church. Oh, that confused me, because they called her Mr. Buttnor. Yeah, because they address women and men as Mr. That's what I got screwed up. The woman claims she left after about 5 years in the movement because she didn't agree with their weird ideas. Last summer, her husband, Mikhail, drifted back into the church as their marriage began breaking up. Her 10-year-old daughter, the eldest of their 6 children, also became involved. Well, yeah, because she allowed it and so did he. The hell does that mean, became involved? Like a 10-year-old child just became involved. Anyways, you guys. Helping Mr. Buttnor in the office. Wait, I'm getting real confused. Okay. Last month, says her mother, the girl leveled the accusation of abuse against Mr. Buttnor to her school counselor. So they must have been public, maybe? Mr. Buttnor was arrested a short time later and released on $1,500 bail, while his criminal lawyer prepared his defense. I'm sure Scientology paid for it. A second lawyer filed suit against Detective Reed Leary of the RCMP, Detective Kent Montgomery, who investigates occult, ritualistic, and religious influence crime. See, a cult does really exist, you guys. It's not just a figment of people's imagination. It's not a conspiracy. For the Edmonton Police Service and Mrs. Garepi, he alleged that the woman has a lengthy history of laying false allegations of sexual abuse that made her testimony incredible, and that the police knew or thought to have known that. What a weak defense. In support of that, he produced an affidavit from a former neighbor of the woman who says that on October 19th, 1989, the woman and one of her children came to his son's birthday. So you know his son probably is getting hurt too, maybe. I don't know. Depends. Invited the boy back to their home to get a birthday present, and then reported to the authorities that the neighbor had been sexually abusing his son. That's a strange thing here. An investigation soon cleared him. The man writes, who's the man? But not before he was forcibly separated from his wife and children for 24 hours. I spoke with my son about what happened on October 19th, 1989. He told me that he had been taken aside by Mr. Garepi and coached as to what to say. Mrs. Garepi confirmed she reported the neighbor. Last summer, a man with whom Mrs. Garepi had been having a relationship was accused of sexually assaulting his own 15-year-old son. Okay, well. The boy withdrew the allegation and the charges were dropped within days. See, that is just awful. So somebody pressured him to drop. But a friend of the man, one Bonnie Holliday, swears in an affidavit that she was aware of the circumstances and believes Mrs. Garepi filed the complaint with the Child Protection Branch of Alberta. Now I think we're getting into Canada, right? Yeah. Family and Social Services. Mr. Buttnor and Susan Kerr, the Regional Director of Special Projects for the Church of Scientology, also claims Mrs. Garepi has a history of involvement with sexual abuse allegations. You see what they do? These people are sick. They wrote in a press release that she has a long list of complaints on record with the police. I doubt that, including incidents of child abuse, arson, and sexual assault. A letter from the Edmonton Police Service to Mr. Gariepi's estranged husband confirms only that there are numerous... What am I reading? Okay, I'll just keep reading it. For her part, Mrs. Gariepi insists she has never accused anyone but her former neighbor of sexual abuse or assault. One other person has come forward with a different story. Barry Morgan, a private investigator, I can't say it, investigator in Edmonton, says that late one night in August 1987, he got a call from a distraught Mrs. Gariepi claiming her life had been threatened. Yeah, by Scientology. We were in the business long enough to know when someone's lying, he says, but she convinced us she was in mortal danger. Over the next 4 days, Mrs. Morgan surveyed her home from time to time, installed a tape recorder in her home, and responded after she called police to report an arson attempt. That's Scientology doing that. But found nothing to substantiate her claim. After about 4 days, he recalls, I told her, look, I don't believe a word you're saying, and suggested she hire another company. Because Scientology got to him. Or maybe they were in on it together. The next day, he says she reported to police that a man who looked like Mr. Morgan pushed her down the stairs. The next night, she reported that 4 men, led by Mr. Morgan, had arred her. Mr. Morgan says he called the police asking if they wished to question him. The officer said, no, this isn't the first time this lady has pulled something like this. Mr. Morgan was never charged. According to newspaper reports of the time, in July 1980, Mrs. Gariepi told police that 3 men had entered her home, tied her up, and vandalized the apartment. These are Scientologists doing this. When she went downstairs to have the landlady untie her, she says the men returned and lit the baby's bedding on fire. She said that she had recognized the men, but police dropped the matter 8 days later due to lack of cooperation from the complainant. I doubt that. Scientology was paying the police off. 3 weeks ago, she reported to police that someone had fired pellets at her home. It was the 4th time that week she reported pellet gun attacks on her and her family. Police found 3 holes in the window, but say they don't know who put them there or why and weren't able to locate any pellets. Mrs. Gariepi refuses to say who she thinks is responsible for the shooting. So apparently the police have been covering up Scientology crimes everywhere. They're in on it. And they're all bullying this woman who is a single woman now with her children. I bet you they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do that down yonder, would they? But she says she has been the target of other kinds of harassment, saying that someone has been watching her house, placing phone calls and frightening her. Basically, the harassment has come about since my daughter made the allegation against Mr. Buttnor. Yeah, you frickin' pedophile. She says Betty McCoy of the Edmonton Cult Information Service says Scientology is a movement that they are watching very closely in the wake of a 1977 FBI investigation that turned up evidence of a concerted effort by the Scientologists to discredit Paulette Cooper, a New York author who wrote a scathing book about the movement. Mrs. McCoy confirms that Mrs. Gariepi contacted her back in December to complain of harassment, and she says she was with Mr. Gariepi at her home one evening last Easter weekend when she heard shots come through the front window. I can't say what happened before I met her, says Mrs. McCoy, a mother of 5, one of whom is deeply involved in Scientology. Psh, of course she is. She had called the Edmonton Society Against Mind Abuse to complain of harassment. All I'm doing is supporting her. I don't know her that well, but I know the stripe of the enemy. Yep. So imagine this. They're completely harassing her, intimidating her. I mean, it even goes beyond that. They're like in her house. I believe somebody did R her. I believe it 100%. And these like monsters like want, especially women, they want women to know that we have the right to R you. We have the right to R your children. That's the kind of scum that are in these Scientology buildings. I don't mean every single Scientologist man is like that, but there sure are a hell of a lot of them. And so if they're not doing it, they're helping cover it up. So a lot of these old ass freaking Scientologist men walking around with their little hunch, let them just drop dead, man. It's a fact. So I will put the link in the description, you guys. Peace. Have a good night or a good day wherever you are.